Good afternoon. It is actually about 2:15 Eastern Standard Time, and I'm actually on the coast of South Carolina. And as Joyce was talking about, school starts back for us on August 22nd. So looking forward to classes starting again and trying to figure out where the summer went. Today, we're going to talk about community-based services as it relates to transition. The first two slides you're going to find, I'm not going to read them to you, but I put these in because I want to call to your attention what IDEA says about community-based services and why, as educators, we've got to consider this. As Joyce was going through the list of things that Ed Associates offers, I really do like the exploration that is offered to younger kids, because I'm a firm believer that you can start transition in elementary school, and the sooner the better. In South Carolina, we start transition at age 13, and I do believe we're the only state that starts that early, which is a good thing. So with that, just to call to your attention, under 300.1A, I know y'all have this probably memorized. Keep in mind when they're talking about FAPE, that free appropriate public education, they are talking about employment as well. When we look at post-secondary needs. So I highlighted these in red just to call your attention to them. I probably should have highlighted independent living, as Joyce once again was talking about the different areas that Ed Associates cover. You have to know how to get a job, banking, and all those types of things. So if I use this slide again, I may actually go in and highlight independent living as well. So there's employment. If you drop down to 300.321, it talks about transition services. And once again, as I said, South Carolina is 13. Other states may have be at 16. But if you look under B, appropriate measurable post-secondary goals based on age-appropriate transition assessments related to training, education, and there's that word again, employment. So once again, as you do transition assessments, it's got to include working towards employable skills. Under transition services, 300.43, once again talks about the coordinated set, but I'm going to drop down to 1. And once again, a results-oriented process. And as you can see, I've highlighted vocational ed, integrated employment that also includes supported employment, because we know that some of the students we serve are going to need continual supports as they move into post-secondary life. And under number 2, I think this is key. A lot of times I think districts or teachers maybe forget about this, whatever, but you've got community-based experiences. So you have instruction, related services, and you've got to have community-based experiences. It is part of transition. And that means the development of employment skills and other post-secondary adult living objectives. There is no expectation may not be the right word, but IDEA does not say that students are guaranteed a job when they leave high school, okay? But we've got to focus on the development of those skills, and that's our job as educators. And obviously, if we can get a student employed before they leave high school or as they're leaving high school, that's wonderful. But once again, we've got to work on the development of those skills needed for employment, and that's both soft skills and training, job training. So a little bit about what it is, community-based vocational training. And I'm going to share some examples as we go forward, probably back from my days as a director in North Carolina. But it's training that uses the facilities, which could be a job-related site, a grocery store, fast food restaurant, department store, materials, persons, and tasks within a business to teach and assess student work. Keep in mind that that facility can be a school building. It could be your maintenance department and so forth. The actual business environment is an extension of the classroom. And sometimes we don't think of that. We don't consider that, but a lot of issues regarding a liability may be out there. And I think it's important to know that if you move a student into a business site off campus, then it is an extension of the classroom. And teachers, counselors, support staff, such as job coaches, will perform their instruction and evaluation roles within that environment. So this is where the training comes in. You're going to be doing the training within that business environment, be it actually in your school maintenance department within your district someplace, or in an actual community-based setting. Under community-based training, there are 3 areas, and we're going to explore those in a second. But the first one is exploration. And that's when students go to a job site to see what jobs are available. You may set up job shadowing. What do I want to be when I grow up is exploration. If I want to work in a hospital, then I need to go and see what types of jobs are opening, and I may need to shadow somebody. The assessment part is you as an educator, a job coach, or whomever is employed for this particular position, you're going to take actual data on the student's interest and the student's aptitude. Let me give you a quick example from a school in South Carolina that was actually using, I believe, the gardening in working for a florist. It was an Ed Associates kid, and we had some in one of the high schools. And one of the young ladies that was about 18 years old liked flowers. And near this high school, probably about 4 miles away, is a florist that grows a lot of their own flowers and so forth. And so this particular teacher had taken the young lady along with 2 or 3 other students, and they had gone to the florist, and one of the jobs was to take those little seedlings and put them in a pot for them to grow. What we found was that the student loved flowers, but she did not like getting her hands dirty. And so that was part of the assessment. I mean, she just would not stick her hands in the dirt at all. Don't know why, but it wasn't her thing. And it was time to move on and look, was there anything else at that florist that she could do? And actually, as it turned out, because she didn't like her hands dirty, it made it difficult. So things to keep in mind as you're looking at assessment. And then training, this is where the goals are on the IEP, and the student begins training in a particular job or a job cluster, however it is set up within your district. So part of community-based training, and I'm just going to tell you up front, when I got into community-based training way back in the mid-90s, when transition first came into IDEA, my guess is the person that I was the consultant that had the grant and was working with the school district and the special ed director, and I think we probably broke a lot of labor laws way back when, simply because we didn't know them. And I do want to go through them just to make you aware of them, especially if you're new to this and you're not familiar with it. But one of the major considerations is there is a non-employment relationship between the student and the employer. The student is there for training. And every now and then you'll hear a teacher say, if you do really good, they'll probably hire you. And we really cannot be doing that. I have seen, and it's been a while back, 1 or 2 cases where a parent called and said, but the teacher promised my child they'd have a job at this grocery store, and it didn't happen. So keep in mind, it's a non-employment relationship. And it's important to convey that to the employer and let them know that this is training and that they're not obligated to find the student a job. If that happens, that's fantastic. So there are specific labor laws that we do have to meet. And at the end of this slide presentation, I have some links that you can go to for additional information. I'm just hitting probably the top of the labor laws. And so please take advantage of the links that I've provided. Non-paid work experiences in these next two bullets, the third and fourth one, kind of relate to each other. A lot of times students aren't paid for work experiences. Once again, that's something that parents and the students need to understand is this is training and they're probably not going to get paid for it because we're working on IEP goals. And sometimes we put goals in the IEP and therefore we think that the labor law regulations don't apply. It's in the IEP, so we don't have to follow the labor law, but yes, you do. So that's important. The other thing I want to say about non-paid work experiences, I don't think it happens as much, but for a while, people would say, well, they're just volunteering. No, volunteering is things such as putting church bulletins together, those types of activities. Normal, I may volunteer to work at an animal shelter. Look at where your volunteer jobs are, and then maybe that will work. But kids don't volunteer to work in a school cafeteria. Kids don't volunteer to work at McDonald's or work in a grocery store. So it's very important that as you go through community-based training, that all of this is made very clear, and that just because you've got it in the IEP, that does not mean that labor law does not apply, because it does. And I will add here, I didn't put the ages, but if you go to one of those links, there's the Department of Labor has an excellent website that shares with you the types of jobs that 14-year-olds can do, 15-year-olds can do, 16, 17, 18-year-olds can do. So make sure you look very closely at that. Going back to one of my first, that transition project I had when I was in North Carolina, we had a student that worked at a dry cleaning business and found out that because of the dry cleaning equipment, we could not put her there. So that was a learning experience for me. The folks, it was a mom and pop dry cleaning, and they really wanted the help, but because of the equipment, we could not do it. Specific guidelines that are outlined in labor law. It has to be a youth or a young adult with physical and or mental disabilities, and those who cannot seek competitive employment immediately. In other words, these students cannot walk into Walmart, Target, fill out an application and take a job immediately. They need the training. And a lot of them, because of their disability, are going to need ongoing support. So we're talking about students that could, for the most part, need a job coach there for a couple months or so. And once again, looking at exploration, assessment, and training. And as you can see, training in a community-based placement, this last bullet is another one that is very important. The students have to be under the general supervision of a public school personnel. So that could be a job coach. It could be a paraprofessional of some type. It could be a teacher. With this bullet, I want you to think, and this has happened with us a couple times, going back to the site in North Carolina, we had about 10 students that we needed to place, but only had 3 job coaches. So what were we to do? And as a result, we were not able to place everybody right away. So we started with our top 3, got them in placements. And I'm going to use Golden Corral because that was one of the placements at the time. And the student there was somewhat independent, needed some training. And so the job coach stayed with that person for a while. And then at what point the young man was able to do a lot of the jobs on his own, the manager of the store put somebody in charge of supervising him so that the job coach could start somebody else. Now, she didn't just leave him there. She checked on him a couple times during the day, but we did have a written agreement with the manager at Golden Corral that this individual would be responsible for supervising. We also had a student placed at Domino's, and that person, the general manager there were only 2 people that worked there because it was takeout only. And that general manager said, I'll be in charge of his supervision. Once again, we went back several times while the student was in the site, but we did relinquish that minute by minute supervision. So make sure that you don't drop off kids at sites. They've got to have supervision, and that really needs to be spelled out in a contract or some type of written document. As a rule, you've got vocational exploration for 5 hours, a job, assessment 90 hours, and vocational training at 120 hours. So look at the assessment part for 90 hours, because sometimes people do get hung up on this. At 90 hours a job, and we have Food Line and Harris Teeter where I live. So I am taking students, I've got 3 or 4 students, and we're going to do some assessments at Food Line. And I'm going to put Cindy in the vegetables and fruit. I may take Michelle and put her into straightening up shelves. You know how you have to move cans forward. And then Joyce is going to be in charge of taking items back and putting them where they belong, you know, where people think they want one cereal and they get to another aisle and they don't. So they just leave that cereal in the paper towel section. So Joyce is going to be in charge of that. So I'm going to work with each of these students. But keep in mind, within Food Line, that's 3 different jobs. Okay, that's not, Food Line is just not one job. Taking care of vegetables and fruits, that's a job. Taking care of stocking shelves and moving cans forward, that's a job. And then replacing items could be a job also. So you've got a lot of leeway there for 90 hours, because sometimes people will say, I can't get that person assessed in 90 hours. But I'm going to take Cindy, Michelle, and Joyce, and we're going to spend some time at Food Line. And I'm going to work there for, you know, a week or 2 to see who does what and if they like it. And all of that is part of assessment. But once again, I've got 3 jobs within one specific building. We also, when I was in Columbia, had students at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we had a student working in the postal section. We had a student entering data, and there was one other job I cannot remember. So under Blue Cross Blue Shield in Columbia, we had 3 students doing different jobs. So there's a lot of leeway with that 90 hours and with the training. So, you know, that's important. Sometimes we think Food Line or Blue Cross is just one job, and it's not. When you're doing the placements, you've got to clearly define it on the IEP, spell it out. Don't just put Cindy's going to do community-based training in Food Line. Be specific, and it can be identified in minutes, a lot of different places within the IEP. It is designed for the benefit of the student. So keep that in mind. You're going to know your students, and you're going to know what they like. So if I said to everybody in my class, we're going shopping at the mall, my guess is about half the class would probably not want to. or if I said we're going to a University of South Carolina football game, the Clemson students would not want to do that. So it is designed for the benefit of the student. Keep in mind what they like to do or want to do. And this statement needs to be included in the IEP. Key things: the student and the parent guardian must be fully informed. We had a situation in North Carolina where we were working with students at Burger King, and they had about three different things. And I did have a parent that strongly said, my child will not be a custodian. They will not be a janitor. And so that eliminated the Burger King option, and we found another placement. But you've got to sit down and inform parents and what you're doing. They need to understand, and sometimes this is hard, that this is exploration, assessment, and training, and it does not entitle the student to wages. I know in South Carolina, when I was a director, I did have parents that would call and wonder where their student's check was. And then when I went back, the students were training. And the parents, I think they just didn't understand it totally, but make sure that the family and the student knows that they're not entitled to wages. We've had situations, I told you about the student at Domino's. He was paid a wage. They opted to do that because he was putting pizzas together. And so in some cases it works, in some cases people just want to do the training. And once again, we're going to talk about this last one. The activities cannot be an advantage to the business. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So here's the criteria of what the labor law said. It says is not an employment relationship. The training benefits the students. I'm working with the students to teach them how to apply for a job. Training is similar to what may be completed in a vocational program. Okay, you could have it's called CATE in South Carolina, but the vocational programs you could have auto body, carpentry. We're going to talk about carpentry in a minute. Gardening, childcare, all sorts of things. Doesn't have to be, but it could be. Third bullet is huge. The students do not displace regular employees. So how many times have I been in a school cafeteria and the regular employees are taking a break, washing dishes, doing whatever, and the students are cleaning the tables and so forth unsupervised, and a teacher said, oh, they're volunteering. No, we don't. Regular employees don't volunteer to clean the tables. So be very, very careful as you're placing students that you're not displacing regular employees. And I know early on in the world of community-based training, I think we probably displaced a few employees. So be very careful about that. Happens a lot when you're in a school district, if the student's working within a school district. The employer cannot benefit, okay? This is training for the students, not for the benefit of the employer. And once again, the case of Domino's, that employer did benefit, but the employer paid the young man, he was 19, he paid him a wage. He paid him minimum wage for working there 2 hours, 3 days a week. So yes, the employer benefited, but he also was paying a wage to that student. So students are not entitled to a job. We've talked about that. And the employer and the student, as well as the family, parents, know that the student will not be paid. All of this really needs to be spelled out. If you're working in community-based training now, you probably already do this, but it does need to be spelled out in contracts. And I think if you get online, it probably is not hard to find some samples. once again, looking at considerations for community-based training. The activities are not going to result in an immediate advantage. So my school cafeteria has 3 openings, and they're like, yes, I'll take your kids. But then they go off and do everything else. A good situation for this would be, I have a student and you have an employee, and they work together while that employee shows the student how to clean the tables, how to wipe off the chairs, how to pick up trash that may be on the floor. So that student's not left alone doing everything. And it could be that the cafeteria is split up. If you're in a high school, a large high school, an employee may be doing part of the work while you're working on a couple of the tables off to one side. So make sure it's not the employees disappear and you and your students are doing everything. That's where it's an immediate advantage to the business, and you're actually displacing employees. If there are vacant positions, then your student should be paid. So keep that in mind. And I've had that come up. Well, yeah, I have a vacancy. That's fine. Let us help train the student, and then, but they need to be paid a wage if they're not being supervised. So with the vacant positions, you've got to be careful that if you're filling a vacant position, then that student should get a wage. Second bullet, always under the continued and direct supervision of school personnel or the employee of the business. Please get this in writing. Just a few situations where something has happened and a student does something wrong, and then they get fired, for lack of a better word. And somebody comes back and said, well, they weren't being supervised. So make sure you have spelled that out. I'll give you it was not funny at the time, but you can giggle about it now. But the student I was talking about at Golden Corral, the student had autism. And so they had redesigned his job so that he had certain things he had to do as part of his job. And one of them was emptying the silverware trays when it came out of the washer. He had to roll the potatoes in foil to be cooked, and a couple other things like that. One of the things at this time, this is a long time ago, so keep in mind things could have easily changed, but Golden Corral, the employees were able to have free drinks, so they could fill their drink cup up, but they had to pay for lunch. And one of the employees didn't always pay for her food, and this young man was under her supervision, and he noticed that she wasn't paying. And so he tried to do that one day. And she got mad at him, yelled at him, and he threw the salad bowl at her. The salad bowl happened to be full of salad too. But he was under her supervision, and he was actually modeling her. Anyway, he lost his job. And I hated that. We found him another one. But those are the things that are very important when you've got students under the direction of employees. And soft skills, that's where soft skills teaching is important. Placement is made on the needs of the student, not the business. And once again, I gave you that one example of that student that she just didn't like getting her hands dirty. And then the parent that didn't want her child to be a custodian. So you look at what does a student want to be when they grow up, and try and place them accordingly. And once again, the periods of time at any one job site or job classification are going to be limited by the IEP and the labor laws. And you can get in depth with the labor laws that tell you exactly how much time can be spent in a community-based placement during the school day. and a lot of that relates to age. Work experience within the school. Okay, so the student is working in the school. It's occurring directly for the school district. And this is important too, because in our districts, and I'm sure in many of your districts, you contract work out. So the work experience must work directly with the school district. So if you contract, and I'm going to use our university as an example, we contract out our food business. It is not done by university employees. It is done by outside contracts. So if I were to place a student at FMU, they would not be working for the district. They would be working for the outside vendor. And so if they're working for the school, it should not exceed 1 hour on the average per day. Okay, so you've got what, 5 hours a week to work. And once again, get back into the labor laws and look at the details regarding this. And most importantly, with outside vendors within the school, you do have to meet Department of Labor regulations. We had some kids cleaning, sweeping out school buses at the end of the day, and realized that there was an outside vendor that was running the buses, and there's several within South Carolina vendors that are in charge of buses. And so we had to kind of redo some things. It was easy enough, but something I hadn't thought about at the time. Instructional considerations and ideas. So some strategies to think about. I took this picture and put it on this slide because it is very typical in South Carolina. There are a lot of formal and informal career assessments out there. So how do I know if my students are ready to go to the community? How do I decide what jobs they want? And with that, I think that you look, are you in a rural, suburban, or a large city location? I would say that I live, well, I think our Florence is about 60, 70,000, and surrounding us is very rural. I live on a farm, and we've got cotton and soybeans in the area we live, a lot of hay fields. So sometimes if you get a formal assessment or you purchase a formal assessment, you need to be careful as you're working with the students to see what they want to do, because they may show big time agricultural farm equipment. And you don't see that in the area that I live. And you see hay bales, much like what this picture looks like. But if I go to a more formal assessment, I may get something that comes out of the Midwest where there are major farms. So be very, very careful. You know, I've seen ones where the restaurants, they're like 5-star restaurants, and the chefs wear hats and all of that kind of stuff. But yet, if you go into the Florence area, we've got a lot of mom and pop restaurants, and t-shirts and jeans are the correct attire. So once again, look for those informal assessments online. You can do a task analysis. Those are great fun to do. And I would encourage you to take the time. For example, go to your local hotel if you've got a Hampton Inn or a Marriott. Marriott hires a lot of young adults with disabilities, and follow somebody around and write down exactly what they're doing, so that you know how to train accordingly. The other thing we do a lot of in South Carolina, which is also a lot of fun, is virtual field trips. And the teachers or a job coach will go out and actually take slides or videos of what has to be done in a job. So that way they can go back, share that with the students. And there have been students that are like, no, I don't think I want to work at a fast food restaurant, because they've taken pictures of, what everything that has to be done at one time. And I had a student one time did a virtual field trip of drug assessment, where you have to check for drug screening before you get the job. And she wanted her students to know, when they tell you in order to work at, and I don't know where, but maybe an auto body place, you have to be screened for drugs. My son works for a factory in Florence, and I know he had to do drug screening. And so she actually went to one of the places in town and did a field trip of everything that they needed to be aware of so that she could teach them about that before they were screened. So it can kind of be fun if you want to do a virtual field trip. Well, I went too far. Let me back up. I'm going way too far. Okay, so we're going to take carpentry. And one of the things that I like about the Ed Associates kits, and we've got a lot of teachers in the state that use them, is people will say, I don't have any way to train. I don't have, how do I get them ready for community-based experiences? And of course, if they're young, those 14-year-olds, they're limited on what they can do. And I think I found that these kits come in very handy for assessment, and just decided I would use them since this is for Ed Associates. But I chose carpentry, and I just wanted to show you how to find out, is this something a student would want to do? Is this something that I can work towards community-based training and maybe get the student a job at Lowe's? We have Lowe's and Home Depot where I live. So I used Lowe's to expand this carpentry kit. So in the module, and I just took some snapshots to add to this slide. Here are some activities. Operating a power drill. I'm going to have to look and see if that's a labor law thing for a 14-year-old. I don't know. Fasteners. What kind of fasteners am I talking about? Can I make a box? And then the materials. Screwdriver and drill. Fasteners, wood identification. What is that? And pre-cut lumber. And if you look at the excerpts provided, you've got the competencies and you've got a pre and post test. And what a great assessment. I could very quickly say, I'm not thinking this is for me, but you can train me a little bit and I'll see if I like it, but I'm not thinking I want to do carpentry. So this is a good way to begin working towards community-based training. Inside the kit, once again, I just took a snapshot. It is not the whole thing. As you can see, it's cut off at the bottom, but I can look down through these competencies and see, is this something I think this student can do? And look, if you get to 16, it talks about discussing geometric patterns that repeat or have rotational reflective symmetry. That probably takes me personally out right there. Calculating the area or perimeter, once again, probably takes me right out of this job. So I could tell you, looking at this, I think not. Do they know the metric system and can they convert it to English? Once again, takes me right out. So I would, I could take this and use it for some of the students that I've taught in the past and say, they may want to do this. But this is where the training comes in. This is where I'm going to work in the classroom to get them ready to go in as a carpenter's helper. And in addition to what's on this list, I'm going to get up with the carpenter and find out what skills, here's my list of competencies. What skills are important for me to train these two young men that want to be carpenters? They've indicated they want to be carpenters. So show me what I need to be working on. And maybe they will say, you don't need the metric system, you can skip that. But I'm going to work with somebody that is already a skilled carpenter to find out what I need to do. And what you often find out when you talk to carpenters, well, they need safety signs. They're going to need math skills. So I've got a student that is really bad at math skills. What am I going to do? But you've got to have math skills for measurement. And I've got a plan what to build. Start small. And if I'm going to build something in class, how much wood do I need? I don't know. But I'm going to have to be able to figure it out. What materials and tools will I need? And, oh, I've got to buy the wood. How much is it going to cost? Things to consider. So one of the things I picked up in the carpentry kit was a picture that they're going to build a table. So I'm looking at this table thinking, yeah, I can probably do that. But what do I need to know about the lumber? What type of lumber? Isn't all lumber the same? It's in that section in Lowe's. Is there a thickness? And you can see with the plywood, there is a thickness. And it looks like the top of this table may be plywood. So do I want a thick top or how thin do I want it to be? How tall do I want it to be? So I look at the legs and I've got to figure out how tall do I want this table to be? And then pricing everything out to cost. And this is a good way to assess the skills of, you've got two young men that want to be carpenters, and building something like this is really a good way to assess their skills at the end of the project. Were they able to do it? Is the table level? Well, how do I know it's level? How do I know if one leg's shorter than the other? All of those types of things you can easily assess by just building a simple table. The other thing I learned while I was messing around on the internet trying to grow up and be a carpenter was at Lowe's. There's a lumber buying guide, and a lot of times I have teachers and they will say, I don't have any materials to teach a student to read. They don't want to read this, they don't want to read that. I don't have anything to teach them. One of the things I found messing around with lumber and some of the things that I was picking out with this carpenter kit is, how would I know what lumber to buy? If I go to Lowe's, what type of lumber am I looking for? Probably not just plywood if I'm going to build a table, because I don't know that plywood will make good legs for a table. And there's sections, and once again, we've got Lowe's and Home Depot, and Lowe's was the easiest one for me to access, but you can get on their website, and I believe it is called a lumber buying guide. And there's so much information there that you can use to supplement this kit that you honestly could probably make a whole semester out of this one kit by supplementing information from your local lumber company. And like I said, I used Lowe's, but it talks about lumber sizes. It talks about lumber stamps. I didn't know that lumber was stamped. Treated and untreated lumber. So if I'm looking for something that's going to be outside, maybe I'm needing treated lumber. But do your students know the difference between treated and untreated lumber? Plywood, boards, and so forth. So once again, the thing I liked about the carpentry kit was I could access my local lumber store, be it mom and pop or be it someplace like Home Depot or Lowe's, and a wealth of information that you could use in this community-based training to get that student ready to go out and be a carpenter's helper. And finally, that's kind of it. I'm not sure where I am on time, but I did put resources here for you. The DOL is Department of Labor, and I would highly recommend, if you're going to be working, if you're a brand new job coach or not familiar with the labor laws, go back in and check those and read them in detail. There's a great link on Edutopia about creating virtual field trips. I have had teachers and some of my graduate students that I work with create virtual field trips, and they've had a blast. And you're kind of like, well, when am I supposed to do that during the day? A lot of times they'll do it in the summer. They may do it on a Saturday. They'll find time to do it, a day off, whatever. But there was one hotel in South Carolina that actually took pictures for the student or for the teacher and the teacher told them exactly what they wanted. And I think it was Holiday Inn or Holiday Inn Express. And they took pictures and actually sent them to the teacher so she could put together a virtual field trip, because they were very interested in hiring a couple of her students once they were trained. And so they worked with her to put the field trip together. And then under Autism Speaks in the other site, or Autism Speaks, there, once again, it's a 2018, not too outdated, but a great assessment there. And this last link, I put this in, it should take you to a really excellent article on work-based learning experiences. And I shared this because Dr. Jennifer Wall, I believe, is going to be speaking for Ed Associates in the future very soon. And she authored this article on work-based experiences. And as I ran across it, I thought, perfect, I'll add this in. So I hate this as a webinar and we can't take questions, but thank you so much.
Awesome. We could have gone for another hour. There's a lot of details. I did copious notes here. But there are really so many practical little tips that you kind of baked into that is just wonderful. And Michelle, I don't know, I'm sure you have a question or two, but I was just going to say it's kind of nice to kind of rehash a little bit of it. Let's talk about parents. You started off in the beginning talking about how one of our sets of kids, our career awareness, is great for younger students, and that's where you think it should all begin. But then later on, you know, we ran across, well, some parents have some very distinct views of where their child should be. And there's kind of a fine line to walk there, isn't there?
There is. We've had parents that want their kids to be doctors, lawyers, and that type of thing. And it is a very fine line, and you have to work with the parents. But I think that's where assessments come in so handy, is to be able, you know, somebody says, well, my husband's a carpenter and his granddad was a carpenter and I want him to be a carpenter. But you're able to work within that to show that, okay, we've done these things, you know, with this kid. I learned by looking at just the lumber buying guide that, no, I'm not going to be a carpenter. But I think with the assessments and with the kits, you can easily begin to figure out who is going to be good at something. Back in North Carolina, we had, I can't remember, he wanted to, I think, to be a race car driver with NASCAR, something like that. But ultimately, through assessments and working with him, the high school found out that all he wanted was to work with automobiles in some fashion, and he wanted a name on his shirt. He wanted that first name, Cindy, on that shirt. And he ended up working at shoot, I can't remember the name, but where you go in to get an oil change.
Like a Jiffy Lube or something.
Jiffy Lube or something like that. Yeah, that didn't exist back then, but
something along
anyway, it would be a Jiffy Lube today. And he ended up working there. He got a job there. But ultimately, that he just wanted to be around automobiles, wanted his name on the shirt. The hardest thing he had was the brakes, and he could not tell time. And so we put our heads together and we got him one of those little kitchen timers. I don't know if they make them anymore. I got some nail polish, red nail polish, and marked the 15 minutes because that's what he had, 15 minutes, and they had 30 minutes for lunch. I marked those in red. So he knew that if it was a break, I turned that egg timer or whatever we had, that was a little egg timer, to 15. He would go eat his lunch, you know, out where they had an area to eat lunch, set that timer. And then when it rang, he'd go back in and do his job. So, and his parents were tickled. But yeah, it is a very fine line working with parents, and it isn't an automatic. It may take many months of work and working with them.
Absolutely. And just, you know, being that empathetic listening educator, saying, okay, well, I'll take all of that into consideration and let's let your child try this and try that. if anything, it's going to prove to the child that yes, you really are good in
Mhm.
carpentry or in, doing car mechanic stuff, or maybe it's not. And so the child can really experience that for themselves as they're going along. Clear expectations and often, right, coming back to it
Yep.
more often than not. And I think also some of those details about when it's a training versus when you're actually doing the job and when they can expect to see a paycheck or not,
Right.
clear expectations around all of that stuff so that, people don't come back afterwards and say, oh, I was disappointed. I thought that, well, we talked about it and here's where we talked about it.
Yeah.
So,
And here's where it's written and here's where you signed. And yeah, we've had, that's probably one of the biggest as a parent or student coming back saying, I thought I was being paid, and sitting down and making it clear.
mhm. Michelle, did you have any other questions? I've got one other, but I won't let you have a chance if you did.
No, I'll let you go ahead, Joyce. I'm just enjoying the ride. I'm loving everything that she's going over. It's incredible.
The other question kind of came on up because you were talking about that you had X number of jobs and only X number of job coaches. When looking for job coaches, who do you look at within a school system? I would assume they have to be an employee and verified by the
Yes.
school system. Do they have to be a special education teacher, or maybe they're social studies teacher or
Not necessarily. I think we had a job coach for each of our high schools when I was in Columbia. And there were four when I left, and we had a transition coordinator and a job coach at each high school. They need to have, in our state, you have to have a CDL license. And so, transportation's a nightmare for everybody. I think that's a big question that always comes up when getting kids out in the community. But we made sure our job coaches could get CDL training so that they had the means of taking the kids to jobs and that. We use paraprofessionals, and I wasn't, it wasn't, states are different.
Mhm.
It was nice that they had a 2-year associate degree, but there were also a lot of folks out there that had the maturity and the independence that I could put them on a bus and take 4 or 5 kids out to the job site. And I knew they weren't standing around on their phone, that they would be working, with the kids. And so I think through interviewing, job coaching is fun. I've stepped in a couple times and had to do it, but it is fun. And I think that you can quickly find the right people through interviewing. But for the most part, I think job coaches are usually paraprofessionals that are hired by the school district. There may be states out there that do different things. I think there are some school districts that hire teachers as job coaches, but then pay becomes an issue. And our transition coordinators, when I was a director, they oftentimes pinch hit, if somebody was sick. We kept them on during the summer. So because Blue Cross Blue Shield was a good example in Columbia, they wanted the kids to stay on through the summer, and the kids really needed a job coach, somebody there checking on them. And so our transition coordinators split up the time with the job coaches. So everybody had time off, but everybody got a little extra pay over the summer to work an additional 2 weeks to help kids stay on their jobs or keep that community-based training going. So
Yeah, that's it really is. You've got to kind of look at what you're working with and kind of
mhm,
put it together, and it's going to be a little bit different everywhere. Just like in finding those local enterprises and trying
yes.
to, make sure that you are preparing kids for jobs that are in their community. I mean, there was one woman who came on and she was from the very northwest tippy tip of Tennessee, and it was a resort community around lakes and they all these, so that was a real natural place to kind of say, well, here these resorts really do need workers, and they paid well, and they were
Mhm.
looking for people who could come on in and do a lot of different types of things, from groundskeeper to inside. the hotels and everything else. And then, other folks have said to us, well, the biggest employer in this community is the hospital.
Yeah.
And, things like that. So, and even the schools,
Yes.
right? So doing things right within your own school community. We have multiple campuses, beautifying the elementary campus,
Mhm.
working on all of that landscaping and things like that. We need that.
Mhm.
It's jobs that need to get done, and our kids could learn such great skills from those types of experiences as well. Like I said, we could probably stay here all day and talk about it, but I'll leave it at that. And thank you so very much for joining us again and sharing your
You're
expertise.
welcome.
There's a lot of really good information here, and folks should be looking for our next newsletter, because they'll hear more good things about it there. We'll tell you about where you can find more information. First of all, if you're watching this, we do have a spot underneath our resources page where you can go ahead and see what's coming up next, as well as go in and look at all of the past ones. So this one was from April 2021, but you can kind of go through this whole carousel and see, I think there's over 20 different webinar Wednesdays that have been done here. So you can come on in and take a look and watch this one over, because it might need a second viewing, or watch other ones. And then, as I just mentioned before, we do take the salient points of these webinars and we put them on into our newsletters. So you will want to take a look for the section on our website here under the resource section. It says career news and views, and that's where you can sign up for our newsletters and share them with the other educators on your team, in your building, and other buildings in your district, because it'll give them just the facts, ma'am, right? Just that whoever that actor was that said that once upon a time, just the facts. We also have up on our website preview packets. So if you want to go and look and see what some of these kits look like, our job ready, life ready kits, you can go on in and take a look at that. And we even have information there about where you can find funding so that you can appreciate and find that information as well. Finally, if you're still looking and you have more questions, you can just sign up for a personal Zoom, and Michelle and your team, you'll get onto a private Zoom and kind of give them a personal tour, huh? How's that been going with you, Michelle? Just get your face up again.
Yeah, no, it's great. We're always happy to share more information about what we have to offer and answer any questions, do consultations with people. So yeah, if you want to click the Let's Talk blue button in the menu bar on the far right, or copy the URL that Joyce has shared there, you can select your state and it'll automatically bring you to a Calendly page where you can sign up for Zoom. We'll contact you and get you scheduled. So we love meeting with our customers or with anybody that has any sort of questions. So please, yes, always feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a really good thing. I've had people who a director would have their team with them, and so you could have your group sitting there looking at it together and then saying, well, here's how this would work or not work, and so forth. So it's a really valuable tool. Well, with that having been said, I'm going to thank you all so much for listening in on this. Thank you again, Cindy. We appreciate everybody spending part of their day. We know how busy everybody is. So we want to wish you a great rest of your day and your week, and happy back to school season.
I know, you're right.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys, so much. See you next time.
Bye-bye.